Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you at this Equal Pay Chicago Coalition event. We're going to wait a couple of seconds to make sure everyone's able to join us, and then we'll get started. All right, good afternoon. My name is Sharmili Majmudar. I am the Executive Vice President of Policy Programs and Research at Women Employed. I also serve on the steering committee of the Equal Pay Chicago Coalition. And on behalf of the coalition, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is the first in our pay equity series. Today, we are going to be discussing making salary transparency work. We have a wonderful panel, and I'm looking forward to a really robust discussion around this important practice. Next slide. So just to level set, what we're talking about when we're talking about salary transparency, it's also called pay transparency. It's also called pay range or salary range transparency, but it refers to employers being open about the compensation provided for current or prospective employees as a step towards pay equity. Salary transparency becomes the law in Illinois on January 1st, 2025. But part of the reason we wanted to have this webinar was to discuss the fact that businesses haven't waited and don't have to wait to reap the benefits of this practice and increasing pay equity in their businesses, and for job applicants and employees to also reap those benefits. Today is March 12th, which is Equal Pay Day. Marked annually, Equal Pay Day is when we raise awareness of the persistent problem of the gender wage gap and the solutions that will help us close it. Based on 2022 earnings data, women on average earn 78 to 84 cents on the man's dollar. So we have a persistent gender wage gap, which is also a racial wage gap. And there are, the good news is, solutions. Next slide. The new law that goes into effect in January says that employers of 15 or more employees must include the wage range and a general description of benefits and other compensation in job, promotion, or transfer postings, and upon request. Next slide. So it's Equal Pay Day. What does salary transparency have to do with equal pay? Well, when employers aren't transparent about pay, gender and racial wage gaps widen, women and people of color lose out. But on the other hand, when job applicants or employees are clearly informed about the context for negotiations, including the pay range, and types of benefits, what basically is negotiable, the gender wage gap narrows. So disclosing the salary or the salary range for a position helps keep employers accountable. It levels the negotiating playing field and paying field. It gives applicants, employees, and enforcement agency tools to detect and remedy unjustified pay disparities. Next slide. And there are really clear benefits to the practice of salary transparency. 85% of workers are more likely to apply for a job if the pay range is listed. And the reverse is also true. Fewer workers are going to apply to jobs where the pay range is not listed. It takes a lot less time to close a position when you have the pay range listed. And it actually increases how trustworthy workers perceive an employer when they are providing their pay range. So today, I am so privileged to be joined by this wonderful panel. I'm going to briefly introduce each of our panelists. In her professional role as Director of Impact and Financial Inclusion at Discover Financial Services, Moji Akinde leverages her passion for justice and equity to create meaningful and relationship-based impact investments to address social determinants of brighter financial futures, enable more people to enter and advance within the financial system, and support the financial wellness of employees. Katrina Johnson-Jones joined Bank of Montreal, BMO's Human Resources team in January 2022 as the Human Resources Director over compensation, acquisition, and divestitures. Katrina's primary focus is to manage the integration of two companies' compensation philosophies. Katrina prides herself on giving back to her community and is also the owner and head chef of her own catering company, Bon Appetit at Biana. Dr. Cristina Pacione-Zayas, First Deputy Chief of Staff at the City of Chicago, is a distinguished education and policy advocate widely recognized for her efforts to promote educational equity and advance social justice. She served as a state senator representing the 20th District from December 2020, serving as lead sponsor of 35 bills that were signed into law, including the salary transparency law, before she joined Mayor Brandon Johnson's administration in June 2023. And finally, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton is a highly qualified, experienced advocate for women's rights, civil rights, and restorative justice. Her career is dedicated to making Illinois the best state to call home, especially for those who have historically been left out or behind. Above all, she is committed to making Illinois a safe, vibrant, and empowering place for many generations to come. We're so delighted to have all of you join us. Thank you so much. To start us off in this conversation, I wonder if each of you could share when you first really understood the impact and importance of pay equity for you. And we'll start with you, Lieutenant Governor.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me today. I certainly want to acknowledge Women Employed, the Equal Pay Coalition, Equal Pay Chicago Coalition, and all of these incredible fellow panelists of whom I look forward to learning so much from in today's conversation. Thank you for joining us. You know, when I am asked this question, share a personal story, I don't know if there was a single moment that really stands out for me around pay equity. In fact, it wasn't really until I started engaging with policymaking and the policymaking process, and then of course, personally becoming a parent, when the blinders were really pulled off and I saw just how normalized pay inequity had really been my entire life. You know, I think back to sort of looking through my career and how it really just felt like if you're offered this position with whatever they tell you you're going to get paid, that's just what you did. And there wasn't really this conversation of looking at who was making what and how you could negotiate. That really didn't seem like an option. It just seemed like whatever it was. And that's why I'm so excited about, as you said, Sharmili, in the opening, that there are solutions and there are things that we are doing right here in the state of Illinois with partners like all of you to make sure that we address and tackle this issue. We know that the wage gap does impact all women. We know that there's a bigger gap for women of color, as you talked about. And to me, this is a matter of justice. And as somebody who is what I consider a justice warrior all my life, it's incredible how sometimes you don't put certain issues in a particular category until you know better. And as you know, when you know better, you do better. And that's exactly what we are doing at this moment in history.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. I know a lot of people can relate to the idea that you just didn't talk about it or didn't ask. And we're definitely seeing some generational differences, I think, emerge in terms of comfort and expectations as it relates to openness about pay. Dr. Cristina Pacione-Zayas.
I didn't unmute myself. Thank you. So wonderful to be in such great company with all these amazing women in the Zoom and also listening in. I like the lieutenant governor. I think it's like when you start to kind of reflect back, one of my earlier jobs, I was a tipped worker. And, at the time, thankfully in Chicago, we're going to be eliminating the sub minimum tipped wage. But at the time when I would be making, a fraction of what the minimum wage was, and then have to make it up with tips and try to like pay bills and all of that, I think what I learned in the process, because One Fair Wage was a bill that I actually also introduced in Springfield, is that this is a relic of slavery. Having to basically earn your wages via tips and therefore be subject to mistreatment. And this is also something that women, particularly because in the serving industry and hospitality industry, there's more women and women of color, particularly, you are in this precarious position of trying to make ends meet, but obviously they're not always coming together and then can be subject to, like I said, some mistreatment. I think the other time that I remember, and this comes together through hiring and constructing budgets. And when I was in a nonprofit and they gave me the budgets to look at and how I was going to put together the next year, and I saw the discrepancies based on gender, I was just kind of perplexed. And so when you see it that plain and simple, it really begins to interrogate the concept and motivates you to disrupt it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you mentioning the nonprofit industry as well as tipped workers, because we definitely see some disparities that are based, as you said, slavery, racial injustice, but also kind of attitudes towards women's labor and valuing women's work and women's labor. Moji Akinde?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sharmili. And once again, thank you for having us today. My Moja Kinde, my pronouns are she, her. I am a Black Nigerian woman, Nigerian American woman with box braids, shaved sides, and today I'm wearing a black dress. And to answer the question, very similar to Dr. Christina, the first times I noticed those pay discrepancies, at least that's what I thought they were then, was working in hospitality. And I remember just being quite inquisitive and asking questions and wondering what everyone was making. And at the time, I'll get responses saying, well, this person has more seniority than you. I'm like, okay, fine. I guess you've been here longer. It's fine if you're making more than me. And then it becomes, well, this person works the AM shift, you work the PM shift, and all of these things. I'm like, okay, fine. I guess we could explain that away. So there was always some kind of rationale, so to speak. And then after a while, I started noticing, no, the only difference between myself and the other people who made more than me was either gender or race and ethnicity. And even though I didn't know what to specifically call it then, I didn't have the words for pay inequity or pay equity, etc. I knew this didn't feel right and this wasn't fair. And that was just my concept of it. And honestly, I really do believe those experiences are what propelled me towards the direction and towards where I am today, which is obviously advocating for pay equity, for gender equity, for racial pay equity as well, and making sure that we're encouraging more of these transparent and open conversations, because it's through that, being inquisitive and being curious and leaning into curiosity, that we find out, oh, okay, I guess you're making at the time a couple dollars more than I am, but those dollars mean a world of difference. So that was my first foray into it. And I'm glad that those experiences propelled me to be here today and to continue the mission.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for highlighting the fact that even though sometimes we talk about this in terms of pennies or dollars, that it actually adds up quite a bit,
Yes.
Particularly over an entire professional career. Plus, the disparities compound, and they mean differences in Social Security or in retirement, and kind of lots of different ways. So thank you for that. Katrina.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Well, it's actually afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for putting this panel together. Great discussion. This is a hot topic across all companies, multiple states, as pay equity is being integrated across the US. I would say one of the primary focuses that sticks out for me when pay discrepancy came into place was more so around when I was going through a compensation integration project with another company, not this particular company, but with another company. And this is when you'll be able to see going through the analysis where male is paid more, female is paid less, gender, race, um, played a lot of factors within that, not just the gender, but also how a particular company may have been paying those employees versus differently how it's being paid on the opposite side. So you're looking at several different key factors that you have to try to harmonize across the board. At the same time, trying to harmonize two types of compensation philosophies and getting that all aligned to make sure that you're going to be paying for equal work for equal pay. So I would say that started for me a good 10, 15 years ago, just starting to see a lot of that, not just on the corporate side, but also on the non-for-profit side. It is there. So it's just, we got to speak out. We got to let our voices be heard, and having pay transparency is one of the first steps.
Thank you so much. I think I'm noticing also that you and Dr. Pasiones-Zayas mentioned kind of the ways in which this became stark to you when you were able to see the actual budget numbers, right? When you were able to actually look and compare the compensation, which is all based on data and information, which is what salary transparency is all about. So we're going to go over to you, Dr. Pasiones-Zayas. You were the lead sponsor in the state Senate of the salary transparency bill. Can you share a little bit more about what motivated you to take the lead on this legislation? And were there specific or issues or concerns that you were aiming to address with the bill?
Yeah, it was something I had been thinking about for some time, right? Because you start to see, it's there was no rhyme or reason when people would post the salary range. And obviously, moving into a more progressive and transparent workspace that, affirms women, affirms people of color, and empowers them with information to be able to effectively negotiate what they absolutely are entitled to. That was the motivation. But I would say that the spark, I got tagged on LinkedIn. Somebody put an article up and it was about salary transparency. And it was like, hey, CPZ, why don't you do something about this? And I was like, you know what? Let's get it done. And I brought it back to, I used to have these policy roundtables composed of constituents in the district I represented, and they would help, they were kind of served as a working group and as a think tank, and we would go through the process. And so our workforce and economic development policy roundtable took it up and really started to champion it. And then we synced up with, the advocates in the field, like Women Employed and others, to make sure that we saw it over the finish line. And interestingly, my counterpart in the House, she separately had introduced a bill, and we ended up merging our bills together so that we can make sure that we were absolutely seeing it through. Because let me tell you, it went through a whole lot of iterations. There were some people that were working day and night to make sure this did not happen.
Thank you so much for your work on this. I know there was a lot of negotiation around it, and for mentioning Representative Canty, who the Illinois General Assembly is in session right now, so she wasn't able to commit to joining us for this session as your counterpart. But I also want to point out what Dr. Pasiones-Zayas just mentioned, which is tag your legislators, talk to them, communicate with them as constituents, because sometimes your needs and interests and ideas can end up moving forward into law. And really making change. So thank you for sharing that. And I know my colleague Mary Kay is going to be dropping a link in the chat of the legislation itself, if anyone is interested in what the bill looks like. Lieutenant Governor Stratton, you recently launched We Thrive, which is an initiative focused on increasing women's financial wellness in Illinois. I know that you've been hosting WeChats across the state about women's experiences and challenges related to financial wellness. Can you tell us a little bit more about the initiative, what you've been hearing, and how salary transparency fits into those conversations about women's financial wellness?
Well, absolutely. And let me just say, because Dr. Pacione-Zayas was one of the ones you wanted at the table negotiating on these bills to get it done. So always grateful for her leadership, and it was an honor to work with her here in Springfield and continue as she continues in her role at the city of Chicago. So back earlier this year, we launched an initiative called We Thrive, and I do chair the Illinois Council on Women and Girls. Governor Pritzker and I have set out for Illinois to be the best state in the nation for women and girls. And We Thrive really kind of came about basically by what we are talking about today and what we just heard, which is that, you know, when we had our opening statements, we all kind of talked about that these inequities weren't things that we necessarily just saw right off the bat. We saw them as we kept looking at our own lives and experiences, and something kind of said, wait a second, I'm noticing something. And as the lieutenant governor, I really just felt like that there were women all across our state who may not even know what issues they should be thinking about. And not because they are, you know, they don't have the capacity to think about these things as women. It's more so that when we think about our lives and the number of ways that in a society that, as we think about the impact of patriarchy, racism, and all the other ways that people don't have access to the same information or resources, we just don't always think about it. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know that there are ways that you can negotiate your salary. You don't know that that maybe you're not getting paid the same as a man is getting paid. And I wanted to create space for women to have that conversation. And representing 13 million people, that's not easy, but we are doing it. We launched We Thrive with a group of women who primarily are who are primarily leading women serving institutions. And we basically kind of posed the question, you know, we hear about the wage gap all the time, but what's the root of it? What's at the core of it? Why does the wage gap exist? What are some of the less obvious issues that are holding women back and really leading to that wage gap? And so to be able to effectuate this work, I'm hosting what's called We Chats. And those are smaller conversations across geographical diversity, across from demographic diversity, with women of every walk of life all throughout our state to just have that conversations. And we are hearing some key themes. Number one, women don't know what resources exist. They know that there's some resources out there about financial health and wellness. They don't know how to access it. They don't know where to find it. Financial literacy is not offered to women in the same way that it's offered to men in many ways. We're, of course, hearing about the issues of childcare being a barrier for working women. And we're able to talk about what we're doing here in Illinois to make sure that that access to affordable quality childcare is more readily available. Women don't often have financial mentors, someone who can really walk them through. I loved seeing Moji's title. I think I wrote it down around director of, I know there's more social impact and financial inclusion. I was like, I need her in my life. And so many women need someone who can help mentor them around these financial issues, because I've heard story after story about how this is not something that I learned growing up. So I want to say, first of all, and I'll wrap up, but I want to say what Dr. Pacione-Zayas said, which is that women need to be empowered with information. Women are also communal. We like coming together to talk about these things. So we need to create space, and that's what We Thrive is all about. We had a group from Southern Illinois. I went to Carbondale a week ago, and 4 women said, you know what, we have seen each other in the community, but we've never come together. Now we have started the Ladies of Southern Illinois, which is now going to come together around financial issues. And I checked back, 4 women, Yesterday, I got the update. They have over 90 women that have now joined to talk about how we can be more empowered. So this relates to the issue of pay, of salary transparency or pay transparency, because we have to get to the root causes of the wage gap, how women can be prevented from being undercut, how posting the wages will help women be able to negotiate a better salary and have the relevant information, and to recognize, as someone said earlier, it's not just the money. The money's important, by the way, don't let me negate that. But the benefits that help women, whether it's flexibility in schedule or whatever else that will help us to thrive. Because when women thrive, we all thrive. And that's what the We Thrive initiative is about.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. I think you talked a lot about, I think, the power of us coming together and sharing information with one another, in addition to having employers share information with us as well. I wanted to pivot over to kind of the practicalities of it, right? It's one thing to discuss the value of practice like salary transparency. But I'm going to pivot now to Moji Akinde and ask you, how does Discover currently approach salary transparency? And in what ways do you believe that it has contributed to a more equitable and inclusive workplace? What impacts have you seen?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sharmili. And Lieutenant Governor Stratton, all day. We have to do this work together. So however, we can be of support, definitely. At Discover, so we actually started sharing and salary ranges in our job postings and implementing salary transparency practices back in May of 2023, May of last year. And this is heavily influenced by our core values, which is just doing the right thing. Do it because this is what is right to do, and not necessarily waiting for somebody to tell us what to do or necessarily waiting for January 2025. And we do plan on doing this not just in the state of Illinois, but all over our job postings all over the country in anticipation of whatever laws may come in the future for those. And the other piece that influenced this is we really do believe in leading with equity and transparency in all that we do. So this is prevalent in all of our D&I practices as well, because as we've stated earlier by so many people on this panel, transparency and information is a powerful tool to inclusion and equity. Because when we consider the type of biases that women often face when we're trying to even just understand what the salary expectations for roles are or understand what we should ask for, where if we come in too low, the perception is, well, we don't know our worth, or it's imposter syndrome, or we're not understanding the level of leadership for the role. Whereas if we come into high, it becomes, well, you're being too aggressive, or you're being unrealistic. Who's going to pay that? Then do you even make that currently? And that phrase, do you even make that currently, is something I have heard verbatim from a recruiter in the past, while negotiated for my pay. So when we think about all of these things, when we're able to share salary ranges beforehand, it empowers us to be able to make the right decisions for our financial future. And that shows up in our DEI practices. Now, it shows up in the work that we do, where we're able to attract more talent. And the way that I try to drive this home in terms of why this is important for building an inclusive workforce, it's an analogy that I use, and it's aligned with you don't know what you don't know. So I would say, let's imagine we're in a room. Somebody shuts off the lights. It's dark. We can't see anything. And then someone says, hey, I've put a stool in front of you. All you have to do is jump over it and you'll get this money, or you'll be able to get out of the room. Well, okay, is it a bar stool? Is it a footstool? Is it one of those play kitchen toddler plastic stools? What is it? So if we don't know what we do not know. If I don't have adequate information, well, how do I know how high I'm supposed to jump? And how do I know what to aim for? So, that information that comes from the salary transparency is a tool. It's a powerful tool that empowers women to be able to make better decisions for them, be feel included and to actually intentionally include more women and people of color, especially into the workforce. Because we, from a talent perspective, right, HR, it's easy for us to be able to say, well, we just can't find the talent. And I'm sure there are many people either on this panel or just listening can testify to having heard that at some point. It's not that we just can't find the talent or the talent doesn't exist. We're not empowering the talent with the appropriate tools for them to be able to say, yes, absolutely, I raise my hand and I would like to be a part of this. So those are some of the ways that salary and transparency does indeed contribute. And we've seen it here to creating a more inclusive and equitable workforce.
Thank you so much, Moji. That's so, I think, compelling to hear. And we appreciate your leadership and Discover's leadership in really pushing forward the transparency and understanding how critical it is to creating that equitable workplace where people do feel like they belong and they are valued. Katrina Johnson-Jones, BMO is also on a salary transparency journey. Can you share how BMO is currently approaching salary transparency and what you see as being next?
Yeah, sure. No problem. You're absolutely correct. BMO is on that journey. As we all think about it, while there are no limitations on how transparent one's organization can be, BMO's approach is to ensure that we're keeping up with the trends within the industry. So with that, starting actually this year, February the 15th, actually, we're still in the kind of early stages with this process. But now on all of our external job postings, that's both on the Canada side as well as the US side, we're disclosing all compensation and benefit information for the roles that we're posting. So that's a great start, especially in the banking industry. We get ourselves out there. We're competing with talent that is hard to attract in certain roles. So being transparent with the pay does help us to attract that key talent, and also attracting the key talent allows us to retain that person. One of the benefits, some additional benefits that goes along with that, by sharing this information externally, we will be able to provide the candidates with a clear picture of BMO's philosophy on compensation. They'll be able to look at the competitive pay ranges. The approach becomes consistent. It's not where we're posting a salary on just one job, this job, not that job. It's now consistent across the board to where all job postings now do have those key benefits as well as the pay ranges for that particular role. It's now digitalized too. Any way that we can get away from a manual process, that does help the process to be able to share more information with candidates as well as internal employees. And that's another one of the steps that we're looking at internally, is to get those salary ranges within our HRIS system, where our internal employees be able to see their ranges as well. We have it posted, it's more so on our internal board, our internal website, but now we want to kind of take another step, move forward, keep up with the trends, put the salary ranges within our operating system for HR where the employees can see just that. Again, just reiterating, this becomes one of those opportunities that we're consistent when we're posting these jobs. That makes us more credible. When a company posts their salary ranges, a candidate will feel some form of trust. And putting those salary ranges out there, the employee, the candidate, actually, my apologies, will actually know if they qualify for the role. Is this role going to be something that they may want to apply for? So doing that opens that gate up to attract the key talent. High attrition, digital solutions, is market driven. We're keeping up with the trends. So these are the approaches that we're currently taking. And we do want to continue to move forward. There's still a lot of work to be done on our Canadian side, even though we're talking more towards Illinois right now. This is full-blown work that we're doing on the Canadian side as far as looking at pay transparency, equal pay. We have a whole department that actually focuses on pay equity that is both for the US as well as the Canadian side.
Thank you so much, Katrina. You talked about kind of like this is an enterprise-wide commitment that you're talking about. But one of the things that you focused on also was about not only attracting talent, but keeping talent. And I think that's really critical. Sometimes we talk about salary transparency as though it's just about getting people in the door. But I think what you've talked about is also about how that transparency allows you to keep people and for them to be able to see a pathway. And I think Moji also spoke to that. I want to quickly mention that in Illinois, it is against the law for an employer to ask you what you made in the past. We're fortunate and Women Employed actually championed a no salary history bill, which means that when you're applying for a job, an employer cannot ask you what you're currently making. Or what you've made in the past, which was really critical. I think salary transparency became kind of is like a sister policy to the salary history ban. A lot of what both Moji and Katrina have said makes me think about Dr. Passione-Zayas, what you've said about the salary transparency policy really just catching up to the needs of the 21st century worker. Can you say more about what you mean and how that transparency benefits workers and employers in Illinois? But I'm also thinking about what you described as that very heavy negotiation process. How were you able to kind of like bring people on side in really understanding how this relates to current worker needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're thinking about the 21st century worker, and especially like post-pandemic, I think a lot of people who were in a position where they had some flexibility to kind of reflect and think about, am I doing the right work right now? You may have passed up a job post-pandemic because of what you went through during pandemic, because you're like, I really don't want to have to deal with that again. And granted, I want to acknowledge that in some instances, that's a position of privilege, because sometimes you don't have a choice and you have to. And so when I say that, and I also think about, generationally, right? There's Gen Z and then Gen Alpha's following and millennials. Some generations really do pride themselves in having what is called a, work-life balance or work-life integration. And so having this information on the front end saves both sides time and money, because you don't want to have to go through an entire process only to find out that it does not meet your salary expectations as the seeker. And then the fact that the employer spent all this time going through the various vetting processes to then make an offer for it to be rejected. And so those types of things come into play. I mean, I think the other piece that is really important to acknowledge is that your salary and benefits is very much tied to your ability to be self-sufficient and self-determined. It's connected to every single aspect of life. If you are a parent and you are working, you are thinking about, how am I paying for childcare? If you have some existing health conditions, right? Benefits such as healthcare is incredibly important. There are some employers that don't offer dental insurance for the first year, or if you have, appointments with your therapist, and for mental wellness and mental health, they limit them. Those are things that people are starting to think about, and you want to know that on the front end, instead of having to sit back and say after several weeks or whatever, oh, this actually isn't a fit for me. And so it's really about, making sure we don't have any kind of misleading interactions between employee and employer, and making sure that all the information is in front of you for the ability to negotiate on your behalf in your benefit.
Thank you so much. I think that what you're talking about, um, obviously is about the information that someone has as they're going into negotiations, as they're thinking about their path forward. And I appreciate you highlighting how important benefits are to that as well. I think the Lieutenant Governor said it as well. Like the pay is important and the benefits are also important. And really understanding the total compensation package is so critical. Um, Moji, I want to turn back to you and ask you, can you share any best practices or lessons that you've learned from the implementation that Discover has had to salary transparency?
Certainly. So when we started this, we obviously anticipated there will likely be questions and um, all kinds of uncertainties, so to speak, that could come up. And one of the first things we noticed were questions around, especially internal employees going, well, what happens to my own compensation? If I find out that the salary range, and I see Katrina nodding, yes. If I find out what the salary range for my job is and I'm at XYZ range in that range or position in that range, what does that mean? Does it mean I'm getting paid less, etc.? So what we did is that we were proactive in partnering our compensation team, partnering with our learning and development and our overall HR team to say, let's equip all of our managers and directors and people leaders to be able to think about how do we answer these questions? How do we address some of these things? And it came in a couple of ways, because it's one, going back to the basics of understanding just compensation basics. How does a salary range even work? So yes, we're pushing and advocating for these laws, but there are a lot of employees, even within institutions who've been there for a while, who really don't quite get it. What does that mean? So having a salary range doesn't necessarily mean if you don't get the top of the range, it means you're being shorted or you're being cheated. No. So we had to equip all of our people managers, our people leaders to understand those basic trainings. The other side of that was a more sophisticated, strategic compensation decision-making process that we had to upskill our team on as well. And for us, it includes a yearly review of all of our salary structures, conducting market analysis, and just making sure that we're able to compete and stay ahead of trends. And for what we found for us through all of these analyses, and some of them being third-party assessments, is that since 2018, women and minorities at Discover earn an average between 99 cents to $1.03 for every dollar earned by men and non-minorities. So this, thank you. This is it's something we're proud of, right? It's something we're proud of. We're constantly going through this data and assessing. Again, you may accuse me of drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but one of our behaviors is also we get better every day. We're just trying to think about the ways that we can innovate, stay ahead of the trend, look through opportunity gaps and improve. And these pay assessments that we conduct, we also make sure we highlight them and look at them through race, ethnicity, and gender as well. So some of these best practices that I would recommend for anyone who's listening is partner with your teams. Whatever business unit you're in, talk to your HR, talk to compensation, talk to risk, right? And I get it. Business leaders, you're thinking, what are all the things that could go wrong? Sometimes before, what are all the things that could go right? So I get it. I'll acknowledge it. In that case, talk to your business risk partners to talk through these things, because as you've heard from a lot of the panelists, there are a lot more benefits, not just to the company, not only to the employees, but to the overall economy when we're able to implement some of these practices.
Thank you so much, Moji. We have questions that are getting posted in the chat and the Q&A. So I do want to pivot, and I know that Mary Kay is also going to post a report that Discover did on transparency, as well as a SHRM report on the impact of transparency, so that you can also have some more of the data on what has been referred to as the benefits and the positive impact of the salary transparency practice to employers, as well as to employees and job applicants. A few of the kind of like practicalities, right? That people are asking about, and I want to raise one question in particular, is about kind of salary increases and most salary increases. This one person asked, most salary increases in my career have occurred when moving to another job or position. They're being concerned that the kind of transparency could reduce any pay or benefit increases if it's fully transparent. And if salary bands are posted for jobs, what are unexpected benefits that might be unseen? Now, I will note to Dr. Pacione-Zayas's point, as well as others, that the Illinois law, at least, is requiring not just salary range, but also benefits and total compensation. So that may be kind of like bonuses and other things. But that's the law specifically. And the rules and regulations on that have not been issued yet. So there's still more to come from the Illinois Department of Labor in terms of how that law will get implemented in January. But I wonder, especially Moji and Katrina, if you can speak to wage compression, kind of like other things that people get concerned about when you start sharing this information more openly.
Sure, I can jump in there really quick and just give a couple of points. Great question, actually, and that's what a lot of people do, start questioning their roles and their pay, especially now that salary ranges or the pay for the role is being posted. It's a matter of the company ensuring that they're doing their due diligence for this employee, not just the employee, but for the company. Is this role being paid properly? The employee should not feel any angst or anxiety applying for a job if this is what he or she wants to do. It's all about making sure that you're getting equal pay for the equal work. In doing so, if you were paid higher previously before, are you still that right candidate for the job that you're applying? If so, management will look at that. Now, you do run those risks of having some potential inequities within the company. However, we still have to keep in mind, even though equal pay, equal work, you are going to still find some people that's going to get paid a tad bit more than others for several reasons. Yes, been in the role, my experience, it might be degree driven. So a lot of those things do play a factor. So at the same time, it's just all about making sure that a proper due diligence is done across the board when reviewing these job offers or extending any type of adjustments to the employee.
And what I can add to that, thank you, Katrina. What I can add to that is, I think that one of the benefits of salary transparency is it signals to the employees and potential employees, maybe, just maybe, it's time for bigger and better. And bigger and better doesn't always mean outside of the company. It could still be within the same organization. And if it's outside of the company, that's understandable as well. Because as a leader and as a good and strong leader, we should be working to empower all of our team members to go for bigger and better, whatever that may be, and not necessarily, a sense of blind loyalty, right? So hopefully if we're doing things right in a company, you'll want to stay within the company, but move on to a different department. And that's one of the benefits of salary transparency, because on one hand, we have to remember that our perceptions often become our realities, no matter what the actual reality is. So if there's an individual who feels as though they're being undercompensated, and all of a sudden they see the pay range has been disclosed, and it's like, oh, you're actually in the very high percentile in that salary range, perhaps the conversation we should be having is not necessarily an increase within this role. Perhaps it's a different leadership opportunity or an opportunity with more responsibility that then comes with a wider bandwidth of pay. So the transparency, it has so many different practical benefits. It's not just the getting individuals to see where there's room to grow, but it's also, you're actually sitting pretty tight. You're sitting in a really good position. And maybe we just need to change the type of conversation we're having from there's no more opportunity to get a raise to what are the bigger and brighter things could you be doing with your career?
I appreciate going from perception to data, right? As kind of like what drives the conversation, and how we talk about opportunity. I feel like we could talk for hours longer. Each of you has so many insights, and I think it's so clearly grounded in your individual, organizational, and kind of lifelong commitments to equity as we're moving forward. We do have, we've incorporated some of the questions that we've heard from folks, but as we close, I wanted to ask each of you, salary transparency is not a silver bullet. It is a tool in a toolbox. Right. And there are so many issues that some of our attendees have raised. For example, what's the unpaid labor that women do in the workplace? And how do we make sure that we're thinking about that when we're thinking about pay equity? When we think forward, what else do you each believe that employers and the state of Illinois needs to do to continue to push us forward in being a leader in the pay equity space and truly closing the gender wage gap? We'll start with you, Lieutenant Governor.
Well, first of all, let me thank you again for this opportunity and this robust discussion and the work that each of you on this panel and you, Sharmelia, at Women Employed, all that you all are doing to push the needle on this. All of the work is needed. And I welcome the ideas that many of you who are participating might have for what we should be thinking about as a state. And I hope you will join our We Thrive initiative to continue the conversation about what resources already exist. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. We are doing some great things. When we raise the minimum wage in Illinois, that disproportionately benefits women who are disproportionately in lower wage jobs. When we pass paid leave for all workers, that disproportionately benefits women. It benefits all workers. And I think one of the things that we have to do is that conversation. So two things. Conversation to understand that this is, yes, it benefits women, and that's why we're here today, but all workers benefit from the things that we are talking about when we raise the minimum wage or allow paid leave for all or expand access to childcare. Those are things that benefit all workers, and we need everyone to see the benefits, including all of our employers. Secondly, we need employers to step up and not necessarily, as was mentioned before, just wait till it is something, enacted later. There are things that you heard today from some incredible leaders about what you can do right now that helps us. It helps us to learn from the lessons that we heard from both BMO Harris and from Discover today. Those lessons are things that we can use around implementation. And then finally, I just will close by saying the issue of confidence is right at the core. This is about building women's confidence. Yes, it is about money. Yes, it is about policy and implementation of policy. But it's also the fact that from being young girls, we are often not given the information that will help us make these decisions. We are still getting messages that we don't belong at every table where decisions are being made. We need to continue to build our confidence. Transparency helps build confidence, and that's going to help us to get to our goals. So thank you again for having me.
And thank you for helping to build the confidence of women and girls across Illinois. Dr. Pacione-Zayas.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I would also, just to build on the amazing reflection from Lieutenant Governor, is I also think about how women also engage in a lot of unpaid labor. And, if you are the primary parent, if you are the head of household, there is so much you are doing to keep the family together on track that never gets compensated. And so that even pushes more impetus to ensure that women are on firm financial footing. And so I think, when we think about some of the opportunities in front of us, as Lieutenant Governor had mentioned, there are a ton of policy opportunities at the state level, at the federal level, of course, and then at the local level. And, you know, my last year in the Senate, I was really trying to put together a comprehensive package around labor that specifically was looking at, you know, how do we position folks who have historically been pushed to the margins and squeezed out of resources and bring them into the center. Let's start with that archetype, that profile, and let's build around that a policy agenda that delivers, right? So obviously salary transparency was one of the things that I worked on. Another one that I think is really important, because you also find a lot of women in these positions as well, is freelance. And so the bill was called Freelance Isn't Free. And so it was really a wage protection bill, because oftentimes there's very informal ways that people are doing freelance work, and then obviously are not able to, you know, retain their compensation. And then, as I mentioned, one fair wage and paid time off, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, these are the types of policies we have to put in place. I don't think they're radical at all. I actually think they're baseline, and we continue to build them up and really adopt an approach like Moji was saying. Like, how can we think about how we are coaching up the next generation and presenting them with opportunities and to develop skills and to push them further to live up to their greatest potential. So I'm just really, you know, thrilled to have been a part of this conversation and getting fed my energy for the day from you all.
And thank you for feeding us as well, with your work, with your participation today, but all of your work, Dr. Pasiones-Zayas. I'm gonna go to Katrina and then to Moji, if you can quickly share what you think are next steps for Illinois.
Yeah, sure. Two things really, actually, one from an employee's or candidate's perspective. Utilize the new law, especially here in Illinois, for that pay transparency to be posted on jobs. This allows for you that have that opportunity to potentially get a reset. So if you feel that you may have been stagnant over a period of time with getting paid for certain jobs, and now you're ready to move on to another company, do something different, having that pay transparency will actually give you the opportunity to potentially do a reset for yourself. As far as the second point, really quick, would be more towards companies. For those companies that may not currently have pay transparency in place, connect and reach out to a consulting company that does specialize in talent and change management. This would help you as a company that you may not already have pay transparency in place, to be able to understand some great potential resources you may be able to utilize. As Moji said as well, bring in your key partners along this journey. That's legal, ER, risk, leadership. You want to hear from them. You want to be able to pull together a great pay transparency plan. And at the same time, keep in mind, every pay transparency does not look the same for every company.
Thank you. And I'll try to make this as quickly as possible because I know we're at time. One of the biggest takeaways I'd love for us to walk away with is equity is an outcome. Equity is not just one initiative, equity is an outcome, and as such, pay equity is an outcome. And what I mean by that is when we think about financial wellness at Discover as part of our financial inclusion work, I really love what Lieutenant Governor Stratton said about the confidence. We're building the financial confidence. We define it, and it's myself and Brianna Jones and my team who leads this work. Shout out to her, she's listening. We've thought about all the different ways we want to approach financial wellness. And to us, it's having the state of having the sense of confidence and peace of mind to be able to manage all aspects of financial planning and, emergencies, long-term planning, etc. However, if we do not have ways to measure and to assess and to remove the obstacles and the barriers to pay transparency and pay equity, how will we then even be able to say, okay, this is where I am in terms of my financial confidence or my financial wellness, if I don't have that information to start with? So what I would encourage everyone, whether institutions, initiatives, organizations, is to think of ways to measure the potential systematic gaps or the barriers to equity that exist in the systems and policies that we have, because it's not just about one day or one event or one initiative. It's a whole system we need to address and take a look at, and then think about what is the outcome going to be. So when we think about equity as an outcome, it makes us to be results driven. So we have to see what the next equal pay day is. Hopefully we get as close to January 1st as possible. So until then, we need to be able to look at those gaps, assess them, rectify where the opportunities are, and just think about equity is indeed an outcome. It's not just one initiative.
Love that, Moji. Thank you. And Katrina, so action oriented, right? So in keeping with that, I want to give it in the last minute to Star de los Santos. As you know, this event is brought to you by the Equal Pay Chicago Coalition, and she's going to share some final thoughts about what each of us can do.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Star de los Santos. I'm the Senior Coalition Manager of Women Employed and blessed to be one of the leads of the Equal Pay Chicago Coalition. And so how can we move pay equity forward in Illinois and beyond? Well, just like Moji said, which I loved it and I'm taking it with me, like we always think about what can go wrong, but what can go right? And you don't know what can go right unless you just take that big step and asking. So have those proactive conversations with your human resources representatives, speak with ERG groups, and inquire about the current efforts. And now that you know about salary transparency, share it out loud with the people that you work with. Spread the word. 4 out of 5 women in Illinois don't know about their equal pay rights. Just like Sharmali mentioned earlier, you can speak to your colleagues about what you're getting paid and your benefits. And a lot of people are not aware of that or are really disencouraged to doing so. So talk with your friends, talk with your families. I know it's a really tough conversation about asking like, hey, how much money you make? But I think we can make so much more progress if we can just feel comfortable having those conversations. Take action. Join the Equal Pay Chicago Coalition. So you can join as an individual or you can join as an organization, and your impact can really help create a workplace that's fair and equitable for everyone. So you can learn more by visiting our website at equalpaychicago.org. You can email me directly at sdelosantos@womenemployed.org. We would love to hear from you. And also, we were just published in the Chicago Sun-Times the other day. So check us out. It's still in print, but you could definitely find it online. Please share it with your friends, learn more about us. It's a really great piece. And then support the cause and make a donation. If you really enjoyed this webinar and look forward to many webinars in the future, please donate to the coalition. All the proceeds go for events just like this, but it also goes towards the Barb Young Scholarship contest that will be relaunched later this year. So thank you so much to all of our amazing panelists for taking the time today on such an important day. And I hope that one day, as we all said, that we will not be acknowledging this day because we will be getting paid equitably and fairly as we all deserve. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Star. Thanks to everyone who participated. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but stay engaged and we'll have more conversations like this one with our fantastic panelists. Thank you all for your work and for your inspiration.